Welcome to the Reef Resilience webinar, Sustaining Fisheries through Building Partnerships with Fishers and Restaurants. My name is Petra McGowan, and I'm the Program Manager for the Nature Conservancy's Reef Resilience Program and the host for the session. This webinar is brought to you through the generous support of NOAA's Coral Reef Conservation Program. Before we start, I want to share some quick information for those of you that have not attended one of our webinars before on how this webinar will work. We're going to begin the webinar with a presentation from our first panelist, and then we'll take a couple minutes of questions from those of you participating after the first presentation. We'll then continue with our second panelist and end with more questions from the group. There's two ways you can ask questions. One is you can use the question box at any time throughout the webinar to send questions, and we'll keep track of these for the end of the session. You can also raise your hand during the question portion of the webinar, and I'll take your question during that time by calling on you. You raise your hand by clicking on the small hand icon on the toolbar on the left of the list of attendees. If you're having any technical difficulties, trouble hearing or seeing the slides, you can also send a question and let us know so we can try and resolve the issues. So I'm excited to introduce our speakers. Both are effective and progressive implementers of conservation work in the Caribbean. Our first speaker is Raimundo Espinosa. He is the Puerto Rico Conservation Coordinator for the Nature Conservancy and was the first Conservancy employee to be based in Puerto Rico. Raimundo leads the implementation of the Conservancy's partnership with NOAA's Coral Reef Conservation Program to address threats to coral reefs. He plans and coordinates a variety of projects, including the development of conservation action plans, protected area assessments, and events to connect resource managers, human use mapping, watershed restoration, and planning. He also works closely with local resource managers and government officials. He served as an official delegate to the Puerto Rican government for the Caribbean Challenge Initiative. Prior to working at the Conservancy, Raimundo's work has taken him from the Galapagos Islands to Baja California. He moved to Puerto Rico in 2008 to work as the NOAA Coral Reef Management Fellow at the Puerto Rico Department of Natural and Environmental Resources. Originally from Ecuador, he received his master's in Sustainable Development and Conservation Biology from the University of Maryland, College Park. Our second presenter is Kemet Amon-Lewis. He's the Coral Conservation Manager for the Nature Conservancy's Caribbean program. Kemet leads the development of the Caribbean Coral Reef Restoration Strategy and oversees the Conservancy's coral restoration strategy and programs throughout the region. He also coordinates the Virgin Islands Reef Resilience Program, the newly formed Virgin Islands Reef Responsible Seafood Initiative, and manages the Conservancy's Sea Turtle Monitoring Program on St. Croix. Kemet was born and raised in the island of St. Croix in the U.S. Virgin Islands. He has a Master's in Marine Sciences from Savannah State University through the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Living Marine Resource Cooperative Science Center. And prior to his current position, he was employed as the Territorial Resource Ecologist for the U.S. Virgin Islands Department of Planning and Natural Resources Division of Coastal Management. So I'd like to welcome both presenters and hand it over to Ray in a minute. But so the presenters get a better idea of who's on the phone, we want to do a quick poll. We have two questions for you. So please let us know, what is the focus region of your work? If you're on the phone and you work with coral reef conservation or fisheries, where is it that you focus the most of your work? So please take a second to answer our poll so the panelists have an idea of who's calling in. So we'll give you a second to fill that out, and then we'll have one more question. All right, so Kemet and Ray, you're checking it out. You've got folks from everywhere, but a lot of folks from the Caribbean and some from the Pacific as well. Great. Okay, and our second question is, through your work, we're interested in what kind of fisheries work, if you conduct fisheries work, you focus on. So you can select all that apply, but through your work, you conduct fisheries. Tell us if you do research, monitoring, management, outreach, or all of the above. Great. Okay. So Ray, gives you an idea of, got a variety of people engaging fishers through different ways on the phone from lots of different regions.
So thanks again, Petra, for the invite to present this work to the broader network of coral reef managers. I'm excited to share this project with you all, as it's a project that we've talked about in the Virgin Islands for quite some time, back when I worked for coastal zone management, and we really weren't able to get it off of the ground until I started working with the Nature Conservancy and a number of different partners. So it's a really exciting point in time to see this program off the ground, and again, I'm excited to be here to share with you guys today. Again, I'm the Coral Conservation Manager for the Nature Conservancy's Caribbean program. A lot of focus is on coral restoration, but I think it's pretty clear that, especially for those of us in the Caribbean, there's a lot more to do than just growing corals and planting them back onto reefs. We really need a holistic approach to coral conservation if we're going to make a difference. So I'll start with a bit of a background. And again, most of you guys are familiar with the Caribbean and familiar with the issues, but we know that there are a number of reasons that coral reefs are important to a number of different countries across the globe, but particularly for Caribbean countries that are typically small island nations and territories that heavily depend on corals for a number of cultural or historical values, for shoreline protection, for fishery as their developmental habitat for a number of important fish species and invertebrates, and they're all important for a number of recreational activities also. Billions of dollars come into the Caribbean for the recreational dive industry each year, and so we have a good sense that they are important and we need to keep them around. The top two images, by the way, were taken at TNC Preserves on St. Croix. The top left is the image of the office, an old plantation estate at Little Princess, and then on the top right, Jackson Essex Bay is a preserve where we monitor the recovering population of greens and hawksbill sea turtles. We know that reefs throughout the Caribbean look like this today. It's a little bit depressing that a lot of our reefs have undergone a shift from a coral-dominated state to an algae-dominated state. A number of different reasons that was caused that has led to that. But I think the good news is, and if you look at the bottom left on this image, and then on the bottom right, you can see two small elkhorn recruits. So all isn't lost, and I think that there are things that we can do to bring corals back. What's caused those threats or the decline and the eventual shift from coral to algal dominated state? Coral bleaching or climate and associated impacts of climate change, overfishing and harmful or destructive fishing practices, land-based sources of pollution. Those are the top three that have been identified by both the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the Nature Conservancy as strategies as to bringing back coral reefs. Those are the three main things that we need to work on. And the new kid on the block is the invasive Indo-Pacific lionfish, shown on the bottom right. And this actual fish was caught in one of our coral nurseries, given to the Division of Fish and Wildlife, where it lived in a lid jar for a month before it was no longer with us. So the Nature Conservancy and NOAA and a number of different partners have been strong proponents of the word resilience and resilience principles and building resilience into conservation action, especially for coral reefs. And essentially what that means is building the ability for the systems to absorb, resist, or to recover from disturbances, or to adapt to change while continuing to maintain essential functions and processes. And these are specifically, the end part is specifically important for coral reefs in that we need to build the ability for them to withstand the natural stressors or threats, by removing some of the human or anthropogenic impacts that they face on a day-to-day basis. So in the U.S. Virgin Islands, again, we took a holistic approach to coral conservation. We developed the U.S. Virgin Islands Reef Resilience Plan, again with a number of partners from academia as well as other government and non-governmental agencies. And essentially what we hope to achieve by the plan was to identify the resilient or important reefs of the U.S. Virgin Islands. And we've already done that for the island of St. Croix, thanks to the help of Jeff Maynard and a number of others. We also know that there's a need to identify site-specific man-made stressors to those sites or those relative resilient reefs. There's a need to eliminate or reduce man-made stressors to those sites by effectively protecting or managing those reefs. And we need to do all of that while actively propagating important reef-building species to restore degraded reef sites and to recover depleted populations. So I'll start with the coral restoration program, as I can cover that pretty quickly. Essentially, we have 6 production nurseries currently in the U.S. Virgin Islands and 2 demonstration sites. We have, at the end of this fiscal year, so the end of this month, June, we'll have 10,000 elkhorn and staghorn fragments growing within our nurseries. We have just over 10 outplant sites and have planted over 5,000 elkhorn and staghorn corals, which range in survivorship somewhere between 97 and 100%. And we monitor survivorship, we monitor growth rates, and are starting to take a better look into genetics so that we can mix the genetic makeup of the reefs that we restore or outplant and help to build the resilience that way. We're providing assistance to other Caribbean countries through site visits and consultations. And we have just launched a PADI engagement with a number of dive shops in the USVI as well as with Stewart Cove Dive Shop in the Bahamas. Essentially, we grow corals underwater for those that aren't familiar on these and some other structures, and we're then able to outplant those corals onto reefs. As I said before, coral restoration alone will not get us to where we need to be in terms of having corals around for the future generations of the Caribbean. So I think what we also need to do is to reduce man-made stress, and doing so help to build resilience. We can do that by initiating best management practices for development to prevent erosion and other sedimentation issues, to develop rapid response plans for mass bleaching events so that whatever management initiative that needs to be implemented can be implemented to prevent further damage, as cumulative stress will impact corals more than just 1 or 2 stressors. That we can develop best management practices for recreational use, that we can actively respond to storms and vessel grounding, and that's something that the Nature Conservancy does on behalf of NOAA and on behalf of the local coral reef trustee, the Department of Planning and Natural Resources. And we can develop coral reef stewardship and fishery programs, and of course sustainable seafoods campaign, which I'll spend the rest of this talk sharing with you. About 5 or 6 years ago, we in the U.S. Virgin Islands started to talk about a Reefsponsible Sustainable Seafood campaign. It wasn't named then, but we had this idea that we could, develop an outreach program to help strengthen our fishery, to help to move towards a sustainable commercial fishery, and to help also improve our reefs. A few years later, it was written into the NOAA Cooperative Agreement, the same agreement that helps Ray do his work in Puerto Rico, and that Petra and the others with the Reef Resilience Program worked through. And so we eventually developed this reef-responsible, market-driven approach to sustainable commercial fishing industry in the U.S. Virgin Islands. The first thing we did was define what reef responsible meant, and essentially it's a use of coral reefs and other marine natural resources so as to not deplete stocks or otherwise cause harm or degradation to those natural resources. And we think that there are two ways that we can do this. One, by creating a demand-focused fishing industry where the fish that are brought in by the fishers are only the fish that are sought by restaurants and the community, and by them and restaurant industry adhering to federal and local rules and regulations. One of the most unique things, or the coolest things that in my perspective anyway about the project, is that it's completely objective. It's all based on the current science and the current rules and regulations of local and federal fishery. What we hope to achieve is to increase stakeholder understanding of how their choices regarding catching, purchasing, serving, and consuming locally harvested seafood can positively influence not just the future of the U.S. Virgin Islands fisheries, but also the future of coral reefs, as our reefs depend on a healthy fishing industry, fish populations. So in terms of the Reefsponsible program, we knew that there were 4 things that we needed to focus on. We've already done the first one. We've already developed the local list of responsibly harvested seafood. We need to foster the buy-in of commercial fishers through engagement and education, and we'll actually do that this summer during the commercial fishing registration week. We knew that we need to engage and educate restaurants so that they make responsible choices while purchasing, serving, and preparing locally harvested seafood. That's what I'll continue to talk about today. And then we need to continue to build the community awareness of the importance of responsibly harvested seafoods and how it benefits the local fishery and coral reefs. And that we are continuing to develop as a marketing campaign, and we are currently engaged with the U.S. Virgin Islands Department of Tourism to actually move this along efficiently and effectively. In terms of the Reef Responsible certifications, restaurant will be certified if they, 1, support licensed commercial fishers, 2, that the seafood that they purchase, prepare, and serve are done so when within season and within the correct size limits. 3, that restricted fishes are never served, and that they focus on the best choices. And that 4, the owners, managers, and wait staff educate themselves about local rules and best practices, not just to improve their compliance, but to also improve the communication with their patrons. In terms of joining the program, there are a few incentives that the restaurants receive. They receive the Reef Responsible certification and branding as a Reef Responsible restaurant. The Reef Responsible kit includes a fish fact easy reference guide, the Reef Responsible seasonal calendar, and which also includes the sustainable or the Reef Responsible seafood list and size limits. As a branded restaurant, they receive free advertisement and recognition as a Reef Responsible certified restaurant, and they receive updated materials and information as they become available. For example, the seasonal closure for Queen Kong occurred at the end of May this year, and so our restaurants have already been notified that there is a closure in place, and that until the season opens back up, they shouldn't have conch in the restaurant. And so this is just a quick overview of some of the information that they receive from us. Call it a crash course in being Reefsponsible. Essentially, we start with a survey of the restaurants to find out if they're already supporting the local commercial fishing industry. If not, why? That they are, have some location for gathering knowledge of local lists and seasonal closures. And if not, how can we get them? What's the best mechanism for us getting that information to them? And then 3, if they, how they increase their wait staff awareness of local lists and seasonal closures, again, to improve their communication with patrons. One of the things we found out was that a number of our restaurants were not aware that that actual license card is provided to each of the commercial fishers in territory. And this is just an example. I didn't want to use the image of the individual for the card that was actually given, but it gives you a sense for who the person is, ID. The expiration date is on the bottom at the front. And then on the back, it actually has whether or not they're a commercial fisher or just a helper, and then the different gear types that they're authorized to use. We should give a little bit of information on gear. We, a few years ago, initiated a ban on the gill net in the territory, both the gill and treble net. And so those aren't used or aren't legally used anymore. And then we also demonstrated the hook and line and the trap techniques. And then give a little bit of more visual example for why the gill nets are so bad, and we shouldn't support any fishers that are illegally using them. This is the Reef Responsible Seafood list that we developed for the U.S. Virgin Islands. Again, it was based on the best information that we have currently available, and we consider dolphin, tuna, wahoo good choices because of the rate at which they reproduce and grow. And then tilapia and lionfish are good alternatives to a number of reef fishes that are on the go slow list. Lionfish is an obvious one, and tilapia, when raised on island, is actually done with pretty good practices. So those two fishes were listed. The go slow list essentially means that there's either a seasonal closure or size restriction to these fishes or invertebrates. And so, if it shows up on the go slow list, you should double back to the fish fact guard to see what the seasonal closure or size restrictions are. And then on the don't eat list, we have all of the federally and locally protected fish species that should never be harvested. Just to give you an example of what some of the fish fact cards look like, again, a nice illustration on the front cover. And on the back, we have information on the fish, like other names, identifying characteristics, some of the biology, and important information. And you'll see the good choice stamped on both of these, as well as at the bottom the IUCN Red List status for the species, which we have for each of the seafood in our program. Same thing with the lionfish. It's a good choice. There may be an issue with Ciguatera in some regions, and so that's listed here. But we have a good sense for where there's hotspots are throughout the U.S. Virgin Islands, and so lionfish will make it into the market more readily. Caribbean spiny lobster is on the go slow list because there is a few important information points that you should know about it. There is a minimum carapace length of 3.5 inches. You cannot harvest females with eggs or gravid females, and it is illegal to spearfish lobster in territorial and federal waters. Lane snappers on the go slow list because there is a closed season April 1st to June 30th. And again, NASA grouper is federally protected, and so it's illegal to harvest the species in local or federal waters in the U.S. Virgin Islands. Apologize for the busyness of this slide, but just to demonstrate that we do have the seasonal closure calendar that's actually made a lot more attractive and on a separate display that the restaurants now all have posted in their kitchens and up front. And then we provide some of these size restrictions and then demonstrate using rulers and illustrations of the different fish species how you actually measure, for example, lower jaw, fork length on the swordfish, etc. Um, and then wrapping up, we share information on a number of sites and resources that the restaurant community can reach out to if they wanted additional information, some local and some regional, some national, and then of course the International Union for Conservation of Nature. We provide additional resources in terms of other marine stewardship councils or sustainable seafood programs, both the MSC and the Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch. We recognize that all of the seafood that we have on island cannot and will not come from local waters. Through our program, we hope that the certified restaurants will support the local fishers for the seafood that they can purchase locally, and those that they have to get off island, oysters, mussels, etc. We recommend that they use both MSC and Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch and any other resource out there really to get the accurate information on those seafoods that they're bringing in. To date, we have 9 restaurants and 9 restaurants and caterers certified. They're listed there: Tutu Bene, Eat at Kende, Dashi, Savant, Cafe Christine, Twin City Coffee House, The Terrace and The Mermaid, which are boat restaurants at the Buccaneer Hotel, and Empress Fresh Foods, which is a local caterer. They received that certificate, which is plaqued and posted in the restaurants. And again, we do a lot of outreach with them. We also do a lot of support for them through both PSAs and commercials and other forms of getting the word out there that they are branded Reef Responsible. They are conscious about the seafoods that they work with, and we should support them. I guess in closing, just one last note about the restaurant. This is a voluntary program. It's not policed in terms of law enforcement going in and raiding their freezers, but we work in a small community, and we offer this program to them. It's up to them to step up and adjust their practices if need to. A number of the restaurants were already doing very good things in terms of seafood sale and preparation, etc. So we continue to celebrate them and expand our list into the near future. And there are a number of people that have been influential in this entire process. Folks in the Division of Fish and Wildlife, NOAA Fisheries, St. Croix Reef Jam, and University of the Virgin Islands. And we've stumbled across a unique relationship with A Taste of St. Croix, which is a premier food and wine experience, which is where we launched the program this year. The Reef Responsible program was launched at A Taste of St. Croix in April this year, and we'll continue to partner with them to bring new programs for the restaurants that are engaged and for the wider restaurant community in general. That's
Great.
it for me. Thanks.
Thanks, Kemet. So we're going to take 1 or 2 questions for you, and then we'll see if Ray is back on. We think he is. So, Kemet, what do you see as the biggest challenges that you had in implementing this project, if any, that you think people should maybe know about?
Well, it's pretty time consuming. I'll just throw that out there. As with anything, if you want it done well, without marketers on our team, we're still able to get a product out there that we got really good comments from the restaurants about. And I think that speaks to the level of energy and effort that we spent in setting this up in the right way. It is time consuming. There was a notion that we would get a lot of negative feedback from the commercial fishers, and we've actually seen the opposite um, for a number of different reasons. I think one, most of the guys recognize what's going on with the local fishery, um, and most of them want to see it around in the future, for not just them, but for their children and grandchildren that will probably be in the same profession. And two, again, it was all objective. It's all based on the current rules and regulations. And three, we're directly saying to the restaurant, we want you to support the local fishers as much as you can. And so that was the only other thing that we were a little bit worried about that worked out well for us.
Great. I have a question here from Irene Morales, and she was wondering, it's kind of following up on what you're saying. What are the specific benefits for the fishers involved in this project? Are you tracking those, or what do you see as the specific benefits for them as fishers?
Yeah, like I said, the big thing is the support from the local restaurants. Typically, there are a number of restaurants that will bring in even mahi and mahi wahoo. You know, a lot of the fish that we can find locally, and so there's been this somewhat of a disconnect between a handful of fishers that are connected to the restaurant industry, and then the others that only sell to people in the community. One of the things that the restaurants has explicitly asked for, and that we're working on this summer with our engagement with the fishers, is to develop a list of the fishers, the types of food or seafood that they catch, as well as their contact information. And so it's a direct link. We're creating a direct link between the restaurant industry and the fishers. And then, without sounding, meaning to sound philosophical in any sense of the word, I think that the greatest benefit is going to be, as we move through this and other programs towards creating a sustainable seafood industry, will help to ensure that their livelihood is preserved for the future.
Great. Okay, I'm going to take one more question before going to Ray. I'm going to try to call on one of the people on the phone. So David K., do you want to ask your question?
Are you talking to Dave?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yes. As far as the restaurants, there were very few listed compared to, I'm sure, the number of restaurants available. So how do you show them that you can motivate the public to go to the compliant restaurants? What kind of marketing are you doing to help that?
Yeah, so we started with a few newspaper ads. There's some radio engagement that we've done. We're working with the Division of Tourism now to develop that bigger campaign. The funding that we had available, unfortunately, isn't an endless pot of money. So we're getting creative now, and I think our Department of Tourism connection will really get us there. That list is going to grow also. So that's our first MAN restaurants. Is the first workshop that we held. We had 11 restaurants attend, and 9 of them were branded to Reefsponsible. That number is going to grow. We're working with the restaurants to encourage the other restaurants to be a part of the program, especially a lot of our more local restaurants. And again, developing our marketing strategy with the Department of Tourism will help us not only saturate St. Croix, but also get to St. Thomas and St. John, which are two of the big, one of the things that tourism wants to see immediately, if not happen last week. And the other point there, while that is a small list, are 9 restaurants. For the Island of St. Croix, it's a pretty solid 9, from cafes, caterers, and like some really high-end restaurants. So again, we're gonna use them or partner with them to help nudge some of the other restaurants and really grow this out to scale shortly.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm going to go ahead and have Ray do this presentation so we don't run out of time. And thanks for the questions so far. So we're going to pass it to Ray. And thanks again, Kevin. Raimundo, let's get your presentation up and see if I can hear you.
All right, can you hear me now?
Gotcha. Okay, go ahead.
All right. Oh, thank goodness for cell phones. All right, then. Well, we'll get started again. My intro's been done. Raimundo Espinosa, Conservation Coordinator here in San Juan, Puerto Rico. We went over this. Puerto Rico, we know where Puerto Rico is at. It's pretty much in the center of the Caribbean. It's a good thing that Kevin ended up going up first because he gave a nice intro to where a lot of this work is funded from. It's the NOAA TNC Cooperative Agreement. The area that we've been working in this area in Puerto Rico in the specific project is in Cabo Rojo. So for the Cabo Rojo project, it's an effort that we've been conducting in order to go through the process, the conservation action planning process for 3 marine protected areas in the area, as well as the first human use mapping in this coral reef priority region. Through this project, we've partnered closely with a diverse array of local stakeholders, and with their input and support, we've developed a priority conservation and management actions, as well as identified marine uses in the Cabo Rojo priority area. And because since no previous human use mapping has been done in the area, or at least none that's been available, and no management has occurred in these marine protected areas, we really had to undergo an engagement process that would really engage the users, the local users, into identifying the areas in the marine environment that are of specific interest and use to their sector. So as we began this integrated ocean management process, we immediately recognized that the commercial fishing sector would be one of our main ocean users, specifically to this area, considering that the municipality of Cabo Rojo is historically known for having the oldest fishing villa in Puerto Rico since the Spanish colonization, as well as having Puerto Rico's largest fishing platform. So as we can see from these numbers, there's a lot of Puerto Rico doesn't have that big of a commercial fleet. It's just under 4,000 active commercial fishing members. However, from this sector, we can see that the lobster and commercial fishermen represents a sizable amount. Of that amount, 30% are based in the one municipality, and in the one town that we specifically targeted to really work with really create partnerships with the local fishermen and cooperatives, 15% of all Puerto Rico's conch fishers are based in Puerto Real. So, I mean, we can see that this one town's economy, which is also the oldest fishing villa in Puerto Rico, is really based around the fishing industry, and specifically conch as well. Conch and lobster are kind of the livelihood for this part of Puerto Rico. However, in Puerto Rico generally, fishers have not formally been invited to participate or become involved in research or conservation as a fishing community. Sporadic efforts of research have occurred that take into consideration fisher knowledge and even sometimes their time, but it has not. The folks usually don't tend to follow up with them, and it's not really the follow-up doesn't show what's being produced with the knowledge and information they're providing. The way that we began our efforts with this project, really trying to begin with the engagement was since especially for the participatory mapping, most people at the beginning warned us and told us that fishers are really jealous with their information of where they fish, what areas are important to them. However, with participatory mapping, we really wanted to make sure that commercial fishers understand that we're not trying to add regulations or add restrictions to their activities. We're trying to see what uses they're using to make sure that when future planning efforts occur in the area, the important fishing areas for the commercial fishers are taken into consideration. So, for example, that areas that are known to be important for conch fishing, not only just conch reproduction, but also that are important for the take, aren't planned for future outfalls or even wind energy production in the marine environment. So we want to make sure that all this information is captured so that we can have their voice be heard during the future planning efforts that happen in the marine environment. So this is one of the ways that we really were able to reach out to the fishers because we were able to really gain some of the trust by being open and honest and really letting them know what our agenda was from the beginning. Also, many times when most of the meetings that are planned with conservation, most of these meetings usually take place either in government buildings or academic institutions, and when that's not available, it's hotels and some of these are the types of centers that are being used. However, due to the restrictions of the scheduling between the fishers have between their work times, these aren't too available to the fishing community for them to attend to. Also, most larger hotel venues don't really cater to fishermen, especially they don't feel, from what we were hearing from them, is that they didn't really feel comfortable coming in from a day of work and going into what would be deemed as a fancier hotel. So we really just try to approach to see what is it that they need from us to really become engaged in the process. So what we tried is we did a couple community meetings in their town center, which is where most of the fisher meetings actually happen, where they convene to talk about their issues. This is where we went to engage them. We also went on one-on-one meetings, met with every individual fisher that agreed to meet with us. We did weekly updates, weekly follow-ups with them. We did monthly visits to make sure we really made sure that they understood that we are not here to just take the information and use it and never hear from us. We want to make sure that they feel engaged in this process. And this really came to the point that the fishers really began to feel ownership of some of this project. Again, a lot of information, all the information that was being provided is information that is needed, but that nobody else has. So it's key for them to feel some ownership of the project, since it's their voice that needs to be heard in some of these planning efforts. It came to the point to even see that at the previous GCFI meeting, the Gulf Coast and Fisheries Institute meeting in Texas last year, one of the commercial fishers actually presented on some of the partnerships and some of the work that we've been collaborating with him, and it was really good to see that fishermen becoming so engaged that they actually felt such ownership of the project that they felt comfortable enough to actually go abroad and present on how they've been collaborating with our efforts. And so part of this also, part of the process to really becoming engaged with the fishers and their activities is, besides going and meeting to where they felt comfortable, is actually also seeing where they went to work, how they went to work, what their daily routine was, and all the ins and outs of their profession and the restrictions and even the aversions to certain fish regulations. We really need to understand them as people. So we actually spend time with them as people as well. There's been, they're usually, in Puerto Rico specifically, which is my experience here, is we have seen a kind of a polarization between fishers and conservationists, that they see folks that study biology as they're interested in the biology of that species or in preserving it. They have nothing to do with us. And there's been the segregation of these two groups to the point that there is not that much collaboration. But at the same time, people are people. We really need to see why it is or what is happening with these communities to really understand what's going on. And if there's really something that I feel that would really made us break some barriers down, is really to understand that, show them who we are as people as well and who we are as an organization. Like many conservationists, our career is more than just a job, which is something that fishers can entirely relate to, because fishing is a way of life for them. So it's something that even though there might be some introductory or some initial friction to really see how collaboration can come from one side that's trying to restrict or protect a resource, another side that's trying to use it, is that both sides are trying to make it sustainable. Fishers, from our experience, even though some were to the point that they did confess to us and they did open up to us enough that we got to the point of trusting. They got to the point of trusting us enough to even opening up to us to when they were poaching conch resources during the closure and how they were doing it. It also went into the why they were doing it as well. Of course, there's always folks that are unscrupulous and will poach and will do it just for the economic reasons. But most of the experience that we had with the fishermen was that they had families, they had bills, like everybody had to pay them, and during these closures, they really needed options. And most of the times, the fishers that are dive fishers, as are the conch and lobster fishermen, didn't really have any alternative to turn to during these times of closures. So pretty much it was a couple of months of the year that their families had a reduction in their income. And so this turns into serious problems socially and for the community. So we really need to try to engage to see what was going on with that. And again, it's actually really seeing what their daily lives are about, what the industry is about, and what being a fisherman is about. And we really stumbled into this. This began as a conservation action planning process for 3 marine protected areas, as well as human use mapping of the area. But we really stumbled into an amazing collaboration and partnership with lots of local fishers. The local fishers that we began to engage and partner with had so much information and opportunities for conservation impact and benefits that for Puerto Rico, it's something that has not been really reached, the conservation impacts that they would be able to bring to the table within the partnerships that we did. And so some of the results from this partnership was, of course, we obtained the spatial data that we needed for the human use mapping, and eventually this will lead to for some marine spatial planning as well as integrated ocean management. We did obtain a lot of strategies that we were able to develop with information that they gave us for the management of these marine protected areas. It included where mooring buoys were needed and where they weren't needed, because moorings shouldn't be installed every place. This really helped inform the local Department of Natural Resources on this effort, and actually already had some benefit to it, because the local Department of Natural Resources was able to reprogram some funds that they had for mooring fields to install those when they weren't really needed, and to actually install moorings that were needed in some of the heavily used areas for those MPAs. So that's in that process. Besides this, why I always feel like this was more than it was actually funded to do was because of this collaboration with the fishers. The fishers were able to ID some shark nurseries that hadn't previously been officially recognized by the Department of Natural Resources. This actually has led us to see that there is almost no information on the shark fishery or shark biology in Puerto Rico. There's only been one study back in the 70s, and so this is something that we're seeing that has had a huge impact. There in Puerto Rico, there's a large and healthy shark fishery. Actually, there's a specific shark fishery in Southwest Puerto Rico that the fishers brought to us that needed to be stopped, which is the targeting of shark pups. So shark pups and juvenile sharks are being targeted due to their smaller size. They're easily captured from the shore, as well as there's a myth that they taste better as well. So these are one of the things that the fishermen are bringing to our attention to actually regulate or further regulate and ban certain unsustainable commercial fishing practices. The attention and the partnership with the fishers also helped us bridge into the larger Western Puerto Rican community, as well as to garnish local support from the municipal mayor. The municipal mayor really came together, has met with us several times, and he has been using some of his local municipal funding to actually use it for environmental protection, which is something that is not really done by municipal mayors in Puerto Rico. So this is really something that kind of transcended the initial funding and the initial project that we had that in itself was successful. It's really been something that, due to the partnership with the fishermen, it's grown beyond something that we originally envisioned. The other thing was something that's more related to what Kevin presented, was specifically about the creating of a community-supported fishery that's based around lionfish. This is funding that we're actively trying to pursue to really create a lionfish market in Puerto Rico that's for local consumption, that's directed from specifically for conch and lobster fishermen, since they're in the water fishing, they're diving in the water, which it makes it them a specific fishery and fishermen that can target lionfish very appropriately. We're trying to create that connection directly so that directly the fishermen have access to local restaurants that specifically will give them an alternative species to focus during the closures. Luckily enough, lionfish and conch are both sold here, are bought from the fishermen at about $5 a pound. So it's something that at least the numbers do provide some alleviation during those closures, which will help fishermen respect the closures, but at the same time not be left without any income. As Kevin also mentioned, we identified that there is an opportunity with the sale of pelagics. So Puerto Rico also suffers from importing pelagics from the Pacific, which is something that is really not necessary for all the pelagics to be imported. When locally, that is a market that can be expanded, that can fishers and restaurants can really take advantage of. Other opportunities also turned up, and the biggest and the best result from all the collaboration was really the trust that was created between the fishing sector and the conservation sector. The trust for future collaborations, I would say, would be the greatest result of all of this all this work. And to be honest, our next steps and our lessons learned. So Puerto Rico, we've only been in Puerto Rico since 2011, and everything that Petro mentioned in the introduction that we work with, we never really envisioned working with fisheries until the Cabo Rojo project. And now we do see that there is a possibility to really have a huge conservation impact, as well as having an impact on local communities and their earning potentials, as well as the quality of life in Puerto Rico, and specifically for the fishing sector. So our lessons learned was that I feel it's something that's pretty simple, but it's really making sure that you treat people as people. Fishermen are people as well, everybody has problems, everybody has issues. You just have to get to know folks for who they are to really see if they're worth trusting. Every sector, there's good apples and there's bad apples, and you just have to get to know some people to make sure you're able to follow through. And it's something that I feel that every fishing community, every fishing sector, in general, is a sector that's interested in making sure that the fish resources and marine resources last for them and for their families and for perpetuity, really. So I guess that's not the widest of words, but I think it's simple and works. So.
Great, thank you. I want to make sure I have time to ask you a couple of questions. So for those of you on the line, raise your hand again if you have any questions for Ray or for Kenneth still. But Ray, the first question I had was, I think you mentioned a couple specific benefits that the fishers have seen from their engagement. I remember you saying the mooring buoy project was.
Yes.
But are you seeing that the fishers are finding that this engagement is helping them, and are there other examples? And how are you supporting that feedback loop so that they see benefits from all the time they're engaging with you? Could you expand on that a little bit?
Yes. So that's actually I feel one of the more difficult questions, and actually because really working with the expectations of fishers and what we can actually really do in a real-time scenario, and how much time, if it's long-term or short-term, and really managing those expectations. We finished this. We began this project a year ago. So within a year, there's a lot of information, and we really began some of the project creation and see how they can benefit. So it's really difficult because it does take time, and it's really managing those expectations. However, the one thing that I know for a fact that they have seen the benefits to this is they do feel that before they're only seen as the commercial fishermen. However, when they collaborate with the conservation sector, with our sector, their voices kind of go beyond the interest of their sector. So it is a bit that I have seen that they do see the benefit in collaborating, because previously it seemed that it was just self-interest, and now it's more of there's more interest of seeing in collaborating and the voices that they can in the information that they can take and can be used. However, that's one of the more difficult things, is really to manage expectations, because even though there's great information that was developed, it's not something that we can really create a market or really create some. It's not a quick turnaround. It's not something that can happen in 1 or 2 months, more 1 or 2 years. But they do, and that's where the trust comes in. They do see the potential. They do see that there's opportunity for their benefit, even though they haven't really experienced that benefit yet, which is, to me, one of those things that I see that's trust. That's real trust, because there hasn't been any actual benefit other than the protection that's to come. So.
Great. Okay. One more question. You mentioned that, it's just about getting to know people and respecting that they're people and engaging them in your process that way. And yet, so that sounds really simple, but obviously it's not really done all the time. And so what do you think are the reasons that something so simple isn't done by more people who are working when stakeholders are the fishers? And do you have any simple tips or any other specific strategies for people who maybe aren't as comfortable approaching fishers, but obviously they know it's a good strategy?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not, again, just at the, again, so fishers, I mean, specifically to your question, so one of the things I feel that's, again, one of the, maybe a larger criticism like where society is at today, but more on that we really not take time enough to really experience people and experience our own experiences, but really seeing where our common grounds are, not just, since this is our job, most of us work, this is our work. So but again, it's our work, it's our job, it's also our careers. We really need to make sure that we're able to invest enough time, and sometimes that does take personal time as well. And I don't know how how organizations are going to look at that. For me, for saying that, you do need to invest some time. It's personal time. It's kind of like Thomas said, as well as in the presentation. You do need to make the time. And if you need to arrange around your schedule, work around your schedule to make sure that you're able to do that during work hours, that's fine. But it's really making sure that you try to, that folks understand that you're not only interested in what's good for you because you're getting paid to do it, but it's really making sure that you see what other folks' interests are. And even if they don't align with your job interests or your job goals, it's really at least being upfront about it as well. But I think the larger criticism is really really taking the time to actually getting to know people, or trying to know people in their setting, especially since most of us aren't located within those fishing communities. It's really trying to understand it. It's easier to visit a fishing community and try and say, oh, why are we not following these regulations when we don't know folks' problems or communities' problems, or why it is that the things are happening. So sometimes it's easy and it's just education. Sometimes it's difficult and it is providing for a family. Sometimes it's even simpler than that. It's just people being greedy. It's a gamut of activities and folks that are out there. But it's really it's like being the new kid in school. We are the new kids in school. We have to get to know the fishermen. They're the ones that are out there. This is their livelihood. So we really need to see how we work with that. I mean, livelihood, it implies their entire life. So we need to see how a fishing activity affects the rest of their life.
Okay, thanks, Ray. So final question, and this one is actually back to Kemet. So Kemet, maybe this wasn't clear to people, but the question is, did you implement any traceability system to track and prove that the fish caught comply with your responsibility criteria? Kemet?
Sorry, Petra, I was on mute.
That's okay.
Yeah,
so the
sorry,
question
I
was,
on mute.
did you implement any traceability system to track and prove that the fish caught comply with the responsibility criteria that you established?
We do have, the committee at times will make visits to different restaurants. Again, the whole idea behind the Reefsponsible program was that it be more voluntary community engagement and either something that the restaurants want or didn't want. And so there is a potential that if we find out that the restaurant is serving out of season or serving some of the don't eat fish, for example. Yes, the branding will be removed from the restaurant, but that's something that we hope to never have to get into. Again, one of the beauties about this program is that we are working with a pretty small community. Ray talked about the 3,000 plus commercial fishers that are in Puerto Rico. We're looking at less than 200 on St. Croix. So I think that effort still, however, on a small shelf can be kind of funky. So
okay, thanks, Kemet.
Yep.
Okay, well, I wanted to thank everyone for joining us, and thank you to our presenters. The recording of the webinar as well as the resource links will be sent out to the network email list after today. If you're not on the list and would like to be, email us at resilience@tnc.org, and please send any suggestions for future webinar topics to the same email. We hope you can join our next webinar in July. It's the third and final in our series of 3 webinars to share information on the development of new tools and management strategies for coral reef fisheries. Look for that announcement with more details soon. Thanks again, everyone.